Stephen Bailey here once again with us. It's on Locked On Syracuse. It's right now.
Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Matt Bonaparte, Owen Valentine with you here on Locked On Syracuse. Thanks for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Stephen Bailey of 24/7 Sports back for his second round with us. Stephen, thanks for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. You are our training camp ear to the wall. You're our guru. So the first question I have for you, since the last time we saw you, the biggest news, or maybe just some of the coolest news, is that LeQuint Allen is out here pulling down Hail Marys like Aaron Rodgers is throwing to him. And if you listen to press conferences and whatnot like we do, you'll hear everybody's asking defenders what happened on that LeQuint Hail Mary, and they're all like, ah. So tell us, what happened on that play? Or those two plays?
Yeah, they were doing – I think it was just a regular – oh, no, okay. So it was like kind of hurry. It was like situational team period. So I think the first one was ones versus ones with like a minute and a half and like 70 yards and a timeout. And the second one was twos versus twos, shorter field, no timeouts. But basically both periods ended with the quarterback throwing up the ball and LeQuint Allen coming down with it in the end zone. The first one was off of Damian Alfred's hands, and I think Michael Jones knocked it away, and he was just kind of like Johnny on the spot. And the other one was a clean hands catch that he kind of went up over Austin Roone and just got it over him. It was pretty sweet. So, they're two kind of like funny plays, and like they're, whatever, like they're fun. But like I think LeQuint Allen, in terms of his overall performance, has done a lot this fall to earn a role. I think he's clearly ahead of Juwan Price, who's the New Mexico State transfer and was the Aggies' leading rusher last year. I think, I think he's the clear number two, and he's going to get a little work behind Sean Tucker. His receiving ability, I think, is really what will allow him to get on the field this year, but his future as like a three-down type guy is very legitimate after the All-American goes to the NFL.
Interesting that you say he's a decent amount above Juwan Price. We were talking about Juwan Price as a guy who maybe is transferring into Syracuse with even more experience than Abdul Adams had when he came from Oklahoma. So yeah, that's interesting. But as for LeQuint Allen's role this season, do you see it like a Cooper Lutz type of situation where if he's on the field, he's going to be catching a football, or what?
Yeah. I mean, he can run the ball. It's just, I mean, look, they're going to give Sean Tucker the ball as much as they can. Like, he's the best player on the team. Like, he's a workhorse. He's in the best shape of his life. Like, it just is what it is. Like, LeQuint Allen is behind the best player to come through Syracuse in a long time. So It's like, where can you get LeQuint on the field in ways that don't take away from Sean Tucker? To me, that's like a little bit of passing down stuff. Like, Sean Tucker can't play every play. And they've worked some two-back stuff in this week. Like, I've seen LeQuint split out a little bit. They have all different kinds of formations with different people in the backfield. Like, Oronde Gadsden is going to be all over the place, including in the backfield as part of the flex wide receiver position. We've seen tight ends like line up in the backfield as well, which I guess isn't. We're seeing it a little bit more. It's happened in the past, particularly with Chris Elmore. But, so those are the two ways I kind of see him getting in, and maybe spelling Tucker a little bit. But, like, I mean, he's one of the most intriguing freshmen they've had in a long time, but he's coming in behind, like, legitimately, like, the best college player they've had since I don't know. I'm not sure how, probably since I've covered the team. I would say definitely since I've covered the team.
Definitely,
yeah. So, I mean, you're going way back, maybe Pugh or Nassar, probably even better than those guys. Like,
McNabb, maybe.
McNabb, like, you want to give Sean Tucker the ball as much as you possibly can. And when you're not giving him the ball, you want Garrett Schrader to be running with it in the other direction because everyone's going to be following Sean Tucker. So LeQuint's going to be good, but I still think it's just hard to find a ton of opportunities for him in year one.
You talk about Schrader there, so I'll ask about him now. We see, clips and pieces and little things and, little tidbits about this and that. What have you seen out of him since we last spoke with you, and how is, the new offense sort of looking with him at the helm?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different day to day, right? Like, I've definitely seen him on good days, and it looks pretty good. I mean, we saw a third down period where he slung 3 balls in right in front of the safeties, timing routes. It was like a seam route, it was a dig, it was a crossing route, like receiver in stride, in a pocket in zone coverage, like, really, really good throws. And, he has days where he's not placing the ball quite as well, where he's a little behind a receiver. He underthrew Trevor Pena I think it was Trevor Pena on a wheel route today. It's not like awful, but it's not, you're not allowing players to make plays after the catch. To me, the biggest thing is he doesn't seem to be making bad decisions, at least that I have seen. When he's missing, it's an execution error, and that is kind of a reflection on everything he said. He said he loves having a system with more options, where it's not limited to this receiver is going to run one of these 2 routes, so you're going to need to either jam it in or like be ready to run. And they say they've had enough time to work through all of the possible iterations of different plays, and obviously the more possibilities within a route in a particular concept, the more chances you have to get it wrong, and the more work you need to put in to be on the same page with the receivers. So, I'm really interested to see how it goes. I think you're going to see him make some good throws. My question is going to be, can he avoid the risk that comes with that, right? The opportunity to throw so many more different balls in different times against different looks. Can he avoid the high impact negative plays that, if this offense, unless this offense suddenly becomes a great passing offense, like, that's not what you want, because you're relying on the run. You want an efficient passing game, not an potentially explosive, but like high risk passing game as well. That's kind of how I look at it. But I really need to see it. I've seen it in practice in kind of team periods. It's a different test to go out and do it, especially against like an ACC team against Louisville in week 1. So I think Schrader has improved. The question is, can he become more efficient without making more mistakes?
Let me take a quick break to read a PSA from the National Health and Traffic Safety Administration. It can happen so easily. You're out with a few friends or coworkers, you're putting back a few drinks, a few becomes too many. It's time to go, and for a moment you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you're a good driver. You live nearby. You can make it home okay. What are the odds of getting pulled over? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? You lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. Drive sober or get pulled over. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every day. The ultimate college football preview is here, a 7-episode preview with college experts, local team experts, and Odyssey college football insiders. It's everything you need to be ready for the college football season in one spot. Search for Ultimate College Football Preview on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Matt Bonaparte, Owen Valentine with Stephen Bailey of 24/7 Sports with you. Let's talk about this offense for a second. Probably the biggest story coming out of the offseason for Syracuse is Robert and I and Jason Beck and this new offense that they're bringing over from Virginia to Syracuse. Garrett Williams, and I don't know if Stephon Thompson did, but Garrett Williams said he saw plays and packages he didn't have a name for and stuff he's never seen before. Have there been plays that have stuck out to you that are like, wow, that's really new, or that's so different than the third and long screen we've seen for 25,000 years? What has it been like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the bag for sure. I don't think you can kind of even like put it in umbrellas necessarily. Like, I think for the most part, the running game is going to be what you've seen. Mike Schmidt, the offensive line coach, has had a lot to do with it. He was here last year. And he's worked hand in hand with Robert and I to incorporate kind of the terminology that Anai is bringing in to mesh with what they've done in the ground game. There'll be some new wrinkles there for sure, but that's the passing game is what's been overhauled. I think the way I like to think of it is you're going to see receivers doing a lot of different things. Alignments are all over the place. There's different splits. You're seeing receivers on the wing, running backs in the slot, out wide, interchangeable personnel that allows you to potentially exploit a mismatch or maybe force a mistake from a new player on defense or if you know how a team is going to adjust to get them in a certain look, to have a certain guy run a certain route kind of situation, right? So I think it strikes me as more purposeful football versus like we're going to run like fairly simple concepts that in theory are hard to defend. But when you don't have speed and size advantages and you have chemistry issues, like it devolves and like there's nothing else to really turn to because some of the concepts are a little simpler. So I think in terms of what the receivers are actually running, you're going to see a lot more in-breaking routes, which there were not, aside from like slants, there weren't a ton of them in the veer and shoot under Dino Babers. Crossing routes, back shoulder balls, a lot more timing routes. Less, there are still some choice routes, but even the choice routes are like mixed in with like different concepts. Like there's one really cool concept that they've done a lot, and it's a rub route with the running back and an outside receiver. So the receiver will run, I guess, a slant or maybe a drag, and the running back will read the linebacker. And if the linebacker goes under the rub, they will go to the flat. And if they go over the rub, I might have that back. So if they go over the rub, linebacker goes over the rub, the running back goes to the flat. And if they go under the rub, you run the angle. And they come across the middle, and we've seen quite a few open touchdowns. That was like one of the earliest concepts we saw in the fall. And I remember talking to Michael Jones, and he was just like, it's a really difficult thing to defend because, like, whichever way you choose, they're going to go that other way. And it requires, depending on the defense, you could maybe, I guess, switch on it. Like, you need to be connected as a defense and prepared for something like that. Like, it's the perfect kind of play to go after a backup linebacker, or you know what I mean? Like, it's again, like purposeful and multi-layered, right? I mean, theoretically the receiver could still be open, and there's other players doing other things on that concept. That's just the first read. So that was one that I just saw and was like, oh, like that's smart. Like I can see why you're trying to do this. I think putting, so that's kind of some of it. You see more downfield stuff, more crossing routes. Receivers have spent a lot of time focusing on like the top of their break, I've kind of noticed, and figuring out how to create separation, like selling the post and going for the corner, and vice versa, trying to make, like, you have this diverse route tree, but still trying to make it look the same up until the break for certain routes. Again, like purposeful, like it seems like the teaching is tying into the scheme. And, maybe I just didn't get to see enough of what the old staff did. Like, this is the most access we've had in a preseason camp. So I can't quite make an apples to apples comparison, but like watching the drills and the teaching, and then seeing the team periods, like it's easy to see it carry over. And it's easy to see like what they're trying to do and the flexibility it has to work around personnel. I think Aronde Gadsden is like the biggest example of that, and he's playing the flex wide receiver position. So he's lining up outside receiver, slot, wing, tight end, backfield. And it's like you can move him around because he's a big-bodied possession guy to exploit a matchup. And he's someone who has really, really impressed me. Really strong hands, great chemistry with Schrader. We've seen some good back shoulder balls, digs, crossing routes, knows how to find pockets and zone coverage. So I think we've been able to see a little bit of the blend between the scheme itself and the flexibility it provides and the purpose that the coaching staff is taking with it and directing toward the individual skills of the players it has.
What is sort of, I feel like I see you asking a lot of O-line questions, and I think we talked about this the last time we had you on. Camp comes to a close today. where is your best offensive line right now? And as Dino has said, he wants that top 7. So who are, your next 2 after that top line as well?
Yeah, so I think the group is going to be left to right: Bergeron, Ellis, Vettorello, Bleich, Davis. The left side of the line, Bergeron and Ellis have worked there like exclusively through camp, so that's kind of like locked and loaded. Center, right guard, right tackle have shuffled throughout camp. Bleich started at center. It was Bleich, Davis, Vettorello for a little bit, and then Bleich got sick, and Davis also missed a little bit of time, and like Enrique Cruz got run at right tackle and right guard. We saw Josh Ilaoa work at right guard and a little bit at center. But for the last like week and a half, like when any of those 3 guys have been healthy, they've been playing those spots. So I think that'll be the grouping. I think it's a really good run block group. I mean, you've got 4 guys above 300 pounds, and Vettorello's like 292. Like, it's the beefiest group they've had since 2018 for sure. I think pass pro wise, you got a couple questions. Dakota Davis being the biggest one. Does he have the mobility to get out on speed rushers? The linemen have said he's got surprisingly, he does have good feet, but he's like 335 pounds. So it's a natural question, right? And I think we're going to need to see how that works out. And, do you send a little extra help his way? Bleich had hip surgery after last season again, and he said he's feeling better than ever, but it limited his conditioning over the summer, and then he got sick during fall camp. So he was running after practice today. Like, he's trying to get in shape for the season. And then Vettorello's snapping consistency has always been a bit of an issue. Those are kind of, to me, the things that I'm looking at. And like, there's a few little weak links there. But big picture, like, that is the best offensive line Syracuse has gone into week 1 with since 2018. So I think they're in a pretty good spot, and I think I think Cruz, who can play guard and tackle, and Ilaoa, who can play center and guard, are probably the next 2 guys. And if either of them has to come in, they've gotten reps, so it's probably not like a total disaster, but it's definitely a step back. I think there's a pretty big separation from 5 to 6. Darius Tisdale could also be in the mix there, but he's been sick. Dino Baber said he's been sick for the last week and a half or 2 weeks, so. I don't know if that's – I don't know the exact nature of his illness. So is that something he's going to come back from and be okay, or might he be out for a while? I don't know. Ultimately, I don't think that affects things too much. He probably slots in capability-wise around where Cruz and Illo are. A little more experience, but, I mean, his pass protection was not good last year. He came back from an injury midseason, but still probably not the guy you want to have out there.
You mentioned Enrique Cruz as one of those 6th or 7th guys, got some reps on the right side of the line. It seems like if you ask anybody around Syracuse football who's impressed you in camp, it's Enrique Cruz. Have you seen that as well, as he's really separated himself from the rest of the backups?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's just built like a starting offensive tackle. I mean, like, you can't pick those genetics. Like, he's built like Matthew Bergeron. Like, he's got lateral quickness. He's got size. He can get downhill. He got some first team and certainly plenty of second team snaps in the spring, and he got a lot more in the fall now. So I just think it's like a natural progression thing, and ultimately he's going to have to play, and there'll be more natural progression. And I think ultimately he's going to be a really good player. Like, I think Syracuse sees him as a future starter. Exactly how well will he do if he has to go into a game? And nobody really knows. Like, Bergeron ended up starting at Florida State as a true freshman because, what's his name? The transfer they had left the team midseason. So, and Bergeron was pretty good from day one, honestly. I don't know. It's hard to expect anyone to really step in and do that well, but yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy who they view as a multi-year starter down the line. But if you put him in there, he does not have game experience, and he would be a step back from any of those 5 guys who are starting.
Ryan Alexander, by the way.
There it is, my man.
I got to shift to the defense because I feel bad that we sort of let this almost player fall through the cracks the first time we had you on here. Jeremiah Wilson has been the highlight of my Twitter feed since you last came on, including, I think it was, a video from you as well, of that one-handed grab for the interception in the back of the end zone. What have you seen out of him? How does you see sort of his role, working with Garrett and Deuce, and where do you sort of see, him filling in this year, and how have you just sort of seen him, continue to grab attention and praise so far in preseason camp?
Yeah, I mean, everyone says he's one of the hardest workers they've ever seen. I get that's super cliche, but this is pretty funny. When he came up for his official visit, Garrett Williams was his host, and Garrett asked him what he wanted to do that night. And obviously the guys go out and have a good time. That's part of the recruiting experience. And he wanted to go to the Ensley Athletic Center and get in field work on an official visit. That's just I don't know. It's just so ridiculous. But I mean, that's who he is. I remember talking to him through his recruitment, and he's super narrowed in on becoming the best football player he can be. That is all he cares about, and that's shown since he got here. I think he stylistically is very similar to Garrett, a smaller guy, really good feet, very focused on technique, and he's gotten to the point now where he's putting himself in the right spots. And that means you have a chance to make a play, right? If you're getting there in time to make a play on the ball, you can then do the things that the casual fan really only sees. So, yeah, I mean, he had that interception. He had an interception in a scrimmage. He dropped an interception a few days ago, so he's not perfect. He's still a freshman. But, yeah, I mean, I think he's really promising. Might see him a little bit on specials. I don't know how much he'll actually play because, if Garrett and Deuce are healthy, they're not coming off the field.
Yeah.
But Garrett had a nagging hamstring injury last year, and I know he's worked really hard to on a lot of injury prevention stuff to hopefully follow the path of Ifeatu Melifonwu and have a healthy last year and go off to the NFL and chase his dreams. But if you need to plug a guy in, it might be Jeremiah Wilson. It also might be Isaiah Johnson, the Dartmouth corner transfer. Bigger body, much more of a press guy, really physical with the line of scrimmage, a little bit shakier recovering and later in the routes than Jeremiah. But those two guys are pretty close. They both worked in with the ones a little bit today. Deuce was in sweats and watching team period from the side for the second day. I mean, he's still doing other stuff. So, I don't really know enough to it doesn't seem serious, basically, from what I've seen without knowing any more. But in any case, those two guys seem to be on similar footing. So I don't know who will end up being that third corner, if they do a left-right thing or they just decide one is better. But it's an important role. Adrian Cole played a lot of snaps last year and, could end up being Jeremiah. Even if it's not, he's positioned well to get on the field next season.
Gotcha. And how about one more D-back, Elijah Clark-Cinco, they call him, from Rutgers. What are you seeing from him?
Yeah, I think he's going to be really good, and I think he is definitely going to play a lot. I think he's a perfect fit for the field safety position they have in the 3-3-5. Lot of coverage against slot receivers, and he played corner for Rutgers, so he's got a lot of natural cover skills. Breaks really well on the ball. I think him and Jason Simmons got hurt, so I think those guys will both play at that position, and Jason can also play on the boundary. They've got some positional flexibility there. I think I would not be surprised to see Elijah Clark make some big plays this year. We'll see that's that last line of defense, the safety position. I think everyone has focused on the defensive line, and for good reason. But the play of those three positions back there could end up being just as important because the defensive line doesn't give up big plays usually. Now, they might open up a hole that results in a big play, but the safety is the one who misses the last tackle usually. The guy gets behind the safety, right? That's the last line of defense, and if those guys can avoid doing that and force teams to work their way down the field and throw against Syracuse's two great corners and drop back in coverage against, with Stephon Thompson rushing the passer and, Michael Jones and Marlo Wax up there, I think the value of the safeties is extremely high this season, and Elijah's positioned himself to be one of the important guys in that room.
You sort of alluded to the D-line a little bit there in terms of, if someone gets by there, it's not as noticeable as when your safety gets burned. what's sort of the D-line update and sort of the progression of your sort of trio at this point on the D-line?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where like everyone internally just is like totally they think everyone's going to be good and all the young guys are going to be great, and like it's just like kind of pushing confidence internally to hopefully get like the best results possible. There's going to be mistakes for sure. I think the first few guys are pretty solid. I think Caleb Okechukwu is poised for his best season yet as a defensive end. You'll see a lot of Terry Lockett at defensive tackle. And after that, I kind of got to see it to believe it from everybody. And Steve Linton is the X factor, is kind of how I'm viewing him. He could lead the team in sacks and tackles for loss and draw double teams and, be a menace as a pass rusher, but he's like 220 pounds. So, how's he going to do on standard downs? Is he going to be able to get off blocks in the run game? And he's kind of been in and out of practice through fall camp. Is that like a preventative thing, or is he already, a little bit dinged up? I think two guys who you'll see a lot of at defensive end are Jatius Gear and Chase Simmons, two redshirt freshmen, both promising guys. Simmons a little more versatile at 260, can kind of move around. Gear a little bit smaller, but I think really dynamic and explosive. So I think both of those guys are going to play, and they're going to get better as the season goes on. As we know, the way the schedule is set up, that's not really conducive, right? Like you're playing Louisville in week 1, and then you've got Purdue and Virginia in your first 5 weeks. And if you want to go bowling, like you probably need to win 2 of those games. Yeah. So those guys are in important spots. I think you'll see Kayvon Darton play at defensive tackle, probably behind Terry. Terry's been in and out of the lineup a little bit lately, so maybe it's closer to a timeshare at the start. But I think Terry and Caleb are the two guys who are probably going to be the most reliable up front. And then you'll see from those next 4, Dennis Jacquez Jr., a true freshman at defensive end, is someone who I think is going to play. He's made some plays. He's an early enrollee, so he learned the system quickly. And now he's already kind of helping teach the other young guys. He's someone who I'd keep an eye on as a potential breakout freshman. But you just going down the resumes, like you can see that's not that's not ideal. Like you compare it to the linebackers and the cornerbacks and even the safeties, where you have Jahad Carter back as one of your best players. Rob Hanna and Justin Barron have played Rover before. They've been out there and played a lot of games. Jason Simmons Jr. and Elijah Clark, like. The experience in the back 8 is there. In the front 3, there's going to be some issues, and I think the onus is going to be on the linebackers and the safeties to cover them up and limit those missed tackles and missed assignments to 5 and 6 and 8 and 10-yard gains and not explosive plays that limits the capabilities of the defense.
We're up against it, so this is the last one we've got. You've been to 10 training camps now, that's what you told us. Where does this team rank?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know. It's toward the top, honestly. Like if you're kind of cross comparing the rosters themselves and not looking at like the schedules, like if you take the 10 best players on this team, they're probably, you can make a case for them against any other. I mean, the 2018 team, obviously, in retrospect, is probably going to get the nod with some of those guys. But, yeah, I mean, Sean Tucker, Matthew Bergeron, Michael Jones, Stephon Thompson, Marlo Wax, Garrett Deuce, Jahad Carter, like Andre Schmidt. I mean, I'm probably missing somebody. I'm tired. But, the top of the roster is really good. Like, those are guys who are trying to play in the NFL, and some of them will carve out careers. You couldn't say that about some teams in the past. So, yeah, I think it's one of the most talented teams they have. The question is, can they do enough to mitigate their weaknesses to make it through a really, really tough schedule? Which we all knew.
Stephen Bailey. Oh, my bad. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That is Stephen Bailey of 24/7 Sports. Stephen, thanks so much for coming back.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
If you want to go get more on the ACC, go make Locked On ACC your second listen every day. Candace Cooper's got you for 30 minutes. Make Locked On ACC your second listen. We're back tomorrow with more coverage of Syracuse athletics. We will see you then.